Welcome again, everyone. So this is the Inclusion Conversation. This is a talk show that I started just over a year ago. And the purpose of it is really to bring people closer together, one conversation at a time. My name is Solène, and I'm your host for tonight. I am the founder of Be Beyond Borders. I'm a speaker and an author. And I just love talking to people, which is why I started this conversation, because I really wanted to share stories and to educate myself and other people, educate ourselves together about lots of topics related to diversity and inclusion. If you can't see me, I'm a white woman in her mid-30s. I have long, wavy, light brown hair, and today I'm wearing a kind of pink reddish dress. So yeah, that's a bit about me, and that's enough about me really, because today is going to be about our guests, Matthew and Krystle, who have come to talk to us about neurodiversity. What if we drop the mask? For the first half hour, we're going to be hearing about them and from them about this topic, and the second half hour we'll stop the recording, and for those who are here live, you'll have the opportunity to share your own story if you want to, and or ask any questions on the subject or any subjects related to this. So without further ado, I want to welcome Matthew and Krystle to the Inclusion Conversation. It's so good to have you here. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? Krystle, did you want to start? The unmute button is a tricky one to find. Oh, you found it. There you go.
Yeah, my computer wanted to have a little dance and put some things over it. So it was like, you're not pressing the unmute. Hello. Yes, happily. And thank you again for inviting me on this show. I am really happy to be here and speak with you two. About me, so I am a behavioural change and finance consultant. So I work and support individuals and organisations improve their financial behaviour, whether it's for their personal finances or business finances. I'm a chartered accountant, so I've worked in industry for over 12 years, but quit that a few years ago and discovered I had ADHD and dyslexia last year. And I imagine also on the autism spectrum as well. And I embrace it completely. Hence by being invited to come and talk to these guys. Yes, I see the cheers. Embrace it, and we're gonna talk more about it today. So I think that's me. I mean, there's lots of other things I do. Maybe I should add in actually. I like to draw and act, which I will mention later, and you'll see why. So thank you again.
Brilliant. I love how you wear so many hats. We met through Hatch Enterprise, which is an organization that supports innovators and entrepreneurs. And I was just like, oh, we need to talk. So many things in common and so many things to hear about. So yeah, yes. Really excited to have you. And Matthew, tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, hello there. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on, Solène. So yeah, I'm an innovation and impact guide speaker and author. I've got a background in technology, psychology, research, and education mainly. Yeah, like a lot of neurodivergent people. My work doesn't really fit neatly into boxes, but really I'm interested in how we can make lasting positive change, both personally and individually and collectively, and particularly the role of neurodiversity in that, and how we as neurodivergent people can help and contribute to wider things. So along with that, I'm also chair and co-founder of Neurodiverse IT, which is a group within BCS, the Chartered Institute of IT for Neurodivergent IT Professionals. I'm founder and co-organizer of Curious Being, a community for unconventional people who want to make the world a better place. And I'm host of the Delightful Dissent podcast. So yeah, and that really is just a quick summary. I'm a late discovery autistic ADHD, based in Brighton, UK. And if you remember, my pronouns are they, them, but no problem if you don't.
I feel like I should have known that, but I didn't.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. We learn something every day, even live on the show. So, so thank you both for sharing, and thank you for joining. We're going to dive straight in, and I want to talk a lot about masking. But before we do that, just in case a few people are new-ish to this topic, can you tell us a little bit about neurodiversity in general and what it means to you personally? We can start with Matthew this time. Just mix it up.
So I really like the fundamental idea of neurodiversity, that there's just a huge range of experience, and that all of it's valid and important, and that everyone is neurodiverse in the sense that we all experience the world differently on the basis of neurology, and that those of us who experience the world significantly differently, there isn't anything fundamentally wrong with us, and that we have a unique role to play. And I think that's such a helpful, given, one of the interesting things of studying psychology and then getting diagnosed with ADHD and autism is how much of the negative message I'd internalized from studying formal psychology about this stuff. And so it's a really, it's a really helpful message to understand and find a way of being in the world that feels good and works and fits with my experience. So yeah, so I really like the concept and the core thing that neurodiversity is a kind of systems level, ecological level. It's fundamentally so important that we have a diversity of seeing the world differently, because that makes things better for even for people who see things conventionally.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I always think about Atif Chowdhury, who I'm sure both of you know, and those who don't on the call, is one of the co-founders of Diversity and Ability, who says that we're all neurodiverse, but not everyone faces barriers in terms of interacting with society from their neurodiversity. So that's I think a good way and an interesting way of putting it and thinking about it. Krystle, what's your take on neurodiversity, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, totally resonating with what Matthew said. And I like the way you ended that as well, about the fact that we all think differently to some degree in different areas. We approach things, the same thing in a different way. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I like it when people, just how you articulated it there, actually, it's about our interaction with the world and the interaction with the systems that exist in our world and who they've been made for. And that's where the challenges arise. And I love the fact that we are talking about this so much more, because that brings all of us in together and highlights the fact that there's nothing wrong with it. It's more about acceptance and understanding. And just like Matthew, us both being recently diagnosed, both after studying psychology, actually, quite ironic. And as, of course, historically, my understanding about this stuff wasn't a positive understanding. So I'm glad that I've been enlightened.
That internalized ableism and stigma is so strong, and unpacking that linked with the diagnosis of the self-discovery of whatever approach that people take is really challenging. Yeah, I've experienced that too. So talking about masking now a bit more, how have you found yourself masking, and do you still mask now? What about right about now? I shouldn't ask that part.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer. I'm masking right now. It's even on my own, I still mask. It's so deeply embedded. I'm not actually sure entirely what unmask me really looks like. And even in ways I know I am doing. So, for example, like on Zoom, one of the nice things about Zoom is I'm always fidgeting, but I can fidget in a way that you can't see on camera. So I've got a quiet fidget toy just out of shot. And so in a sense that's masking too. And I think there is I am right now and continue to do, and it's an ongoing discovery of actually what is masking, what isn't, what's helpful, what isn't for me. And I think that's maybe part of being such a so late diagnosis as well, is actually, what really, the stuff I've been told about me versus the stuff I've experienced, and the gap between those two things, and trying to figure out how to join them up again.
Yeah, I got one of them. Do you have one of them?
I've got a stone.
I'm eating raisins and nuts because I have to eat constantly. Just put it in my mouth, just constantly. Just
So what about for you, Krystle, then, in terms of like, how have you found yourself masking over time, and do you still do it now as well?
yeah, I mean, for sure. I think it's an ongoing journey. I'm sure, like Matthew, I don't know, Celine, where you fit on this, but if I look at myself, say, yeah, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, and just go back further backwards in life, the masking is thicker. So it is definitely dissipating, and not as strong. And that, I think, is perfectly matched with self-acceptance, confidence in my uniqueness, in my awesomeness is a word I like to use a lot. And calling it that in itself, allows me to then sit in who and how I am. And yeah, if I was to give an example right now, I mean, my leg, I'd love to have my leg up in my chest, but I'm trying not to do that.
Do it. This is the call to do it
right?
on. I mean, why not? Like, but yeah, I can relate to everything that you said. It's really interesting. I was actually reflecting on this yesterday, thinking I've just come back from a 4 days express trip to New York. I'm absolutely jet lagged, and I'm going to be masking and bringing all this energy on this call when actually I just want to go to bed and sleep. So it's just the irony of like hosting a session on masking when you're going to be masking. But I think that's why it's so important to talk about it. And I don't know if you found this, but the more I've discovered about my own neurodiversity and my own journey, the harder it is to fully mask. Like, there are parts that just seep through now, whereas when I didn't know, it was much more like, and I had much more stigma, like you were saying before, Krystle. It was like much more pressed down, and now it's harder work. It just feels like
I think that comes with, right? So I guess what we're doing, we're learning about ourselves. So I think the journey of self-discovery is also a journey of self-acceptance. And as you learn to accept yourself more, that means hiding less. So, and that's what's happening with me, is literally every month, week goes by, I'm like, actually, whatever, and I get more cocky with, this is how I am, whatever. And then as well, back to me saying years ago, it was so much thicker. I worked in finance. So, there are so many things that play there if we start talking about intersectionality. I'm a Black woman who is neurodiverse in finance. I mean, when I'm saying it now, I'm like, whoa, yeah. And it was that. So as I'm now self-employed and doing my own thing and building a life that works for me and I enjoy, I can mask less.
That's brilliant. That's really good to hear, and sounds like definitely a journey. And I have to say that whatever is a much more polite way than the way I put it. F it. That one. That's the one.
Do you know what? Whenever I do these live things, I'm like, I don't like swearing when I'm being recorded. I hold it back.
I meant to ask that before we started recording, actually. Was I allowed to swear?
I mean, I do swear.
I definitely put on the video that, it's not suitable for children. So I think we're okay. I think we're okay to swear.
Good to know.
So Matthew, I know that you said it's really hard to think or to picture who you would be or how you would be if you weren't masking. Do you have any guesses or intuitions around what the answer might be?
Oh, I think for me, so much of masking is it's kind of pre-conscious. It's not something I'm doing, and I think it's part because I've done it for so long. It's so highly practiced. I've done it since I was a small child, and so I don't really have access to what else would be there. Just that it's a huge amount of effort and it's tiring, and sometimes it means ignoring things that I really should be listening to, and so. It's kind of a slow uncovering thing. I think one of the things I've really come to understand is there's both kind of physical stuff and reacting to things, and actually being like, actually no, I don't like this, like moving away from stuff I don't like towards stuff I like. But one of the other big things, and I work with a lot of people who are twice exceptional, so neurodivergent and intellectually and or creatively gifted, which means almost everyone who's neurodivergent and works in a professional thing, well, because of the huge barriers that neurodivergent people face, you have to have some other lot of resources to just get over the barriers. And I think when we talk about masking, a lot of people get the impression that we're kind of papering over the cracks, as it were, that it means hiding deficit. Whereas actually, I've noticed so much of masking, certainly me, is about holding back. It's about not saying exactly what I'm seeing right now, because I know that's going to scare people. It's about not following the logical thread, because I know I'll lose people and it will be called tangenting. But with other people with ADHD, it's just normal. We just do that. We don't get lost. And so it's like, I'm not leaving, I'm just exploring the problem space, really. I'm not tangenting, I'm just exploring the whole thing. And so I think that for me, a lot of the masking is how much I've been holding myself back for so long, and that I'm holding myself back less around how I'm expressing myself, what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling. So I think that for me is as much of a specific answer as I can give.
That actually really resonates with me. I hadn't thought about it like that in terms of the holding back, because having been so many times referred to as too emotional, too much, too intense, too hyperactive. I recently got told I was too passionate. I was like, can someone be too passionate? Is that even a thing? Apparently so. so yeah, I can relate to that. The holding back, the kind of toning yourself down so that other people seem to feel more comfortable. We're
really not supposed to feel as strongly about things as we often do, particularly like one of the underlying traits of my conditions is emotional intensity. And so it's like, I feel things, I really feel things, and you're just not allowed socially as much as to express that as much as I do. So yeah, that moderation, I think, is actually a big part of the masking.
Yeah, totally. Lynn put in the chat, we're told so much as children how to behave. We have masked to fit in. Yeah, we have to mask to fit in. It's that fitting in versus belonging again, isn't it? Fitting in is changing ourselves so that we feel that we can be part of the group. Belonging is being ourselves and being part of the group. And that nuance is so important, I think, in this conversation as well. Krystle, I know you said you're on that kind of path towards less and less masking. What do you think is next? Like, how less masking looks like in the future?
Oh, there's a whole load still there. There's a whole load. I mean, where I mentioned, there's all these things that I like to do. So I decided to be an actress. I like to perform. I do draw still. But, if you think about an actress, the outward, full of energy, my arms go, like I'm full of beans. I'm always full. If we could use that word to describe it, expressive. And I think, Matthew, yes, definitely. I think for sure, before even knowing that I was neurodiverse to such a degree, I was fully aware that I was always holding back. Yeah. Suppressing kind of how I wanted to be. I can, ideally, I'm quite random. I'm quite, you do things that people are like, whatever. You guys are both laughing because I guess you resonate with this, right?
100%.
And I think a lot of my approach to things, almost everything, is very playful, is very, and for I guess lots of neurotypicals, in many situations you have to be quite, I don't know if you've heard the phrase L7. It's from when we were children. Literally, it's really, I'm embarrassed to do this, but L7 means square. I can't believe I just did that. It's another way of saying just really black and white. But that is not what happens in my brain. I like to you know, put something in, inject it, you know, and it, for me, it opens up opportunities to explore. And Matthew, you described it so lovely, and I like the way you put it in. I just want to say I love the way you articulate things, so beautiful. But I think when you was talking about the way that our brains wander and go over here, it's actually not getting lost. We're exploring so many different dimensions of it, which makes us great problem solvers. You know, the fact that we can, I just come off of a client call, you know, she put forward something that she's thinking of, and I was like, hold on a second, this, and she was like, oh my gosh, yeah. You know, identified so many different angles to the suggestion. And that's a beautiful thing, being able to do that in all these different environments and situations that are not masked me would be full of that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I worry like how people would keep up.
I think what I wanted to say was actually more
Yeah.
expressive, for sure, I think would be a good phrase to describe the part of me that is strongly suppressed.
Yeah. We got in the chat also Kim mentioning people pleasing as a form of masking, which is quite an interesting thought as well. I'm going to ponder that. I'm going to take that away and ponder that. How do we find the balance? Because so we're talking about masking, being our authentic selves, not necessarily even always knowing what that authentic self is and look like, and constantly exploring and uncovering that. So how do we balance it out? And especially because sometimes there are situations when masking is the safe option or it's the efficient option. I don't know, do you have any examples from your personal life, maybe something quite concrete where you've been like, you know what, in this instance, I've picked masking, but I've done it consciously? You're both nodding. So Krystle, go first.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I've been talking to, I've got a friend who's a coach. She's a confidence coach, and she's amazing. So we talk about this stuff all the time. And she's also a recent diagnosed ADHD. I think she's mid-40s. I hope I got that right. But she talks about that nuance between fully presenting yourself as, you know, fully, and when actually choosing which version of yourself to bring to the environment. And I like the way she put that. What she alludes to is actually there's different versions, different sides of you, and not every situation requires every version of you for it to be the most optimal outcome. So, for example, and I like thinking of it this way, you know, if I'm looking after my niece who is, say, 3 years old, that requires a certain version of Krystle. That requires a responsible leading, not someone who's, you know, what I do when I'm on my, you know, excited free state. That requires a version of me that I am 100% committed to providing at that time for the best outcome for that situation. I think that's the way that I go about choosing when to mask certain parts of me and when actually I'm going to bring this side because why not? And then there are some of the situations where you can play with and explore. You know, maybe textbook would say you bring the mask, and actually you can inject a bit of whatever. Yeah, that's how I'm navigating it at the moment.
I think that idea of the range, you know, it's not about everyone. We always need to show up as an aspect of ourselves in different places, but it's being able to have that full breadth instead of when we are in a place where it's appropriate to show up in a certain way, where is to be able to do that, I think, and to feel comfortable doing that. That for me is the really big difference over like not showing up and yeah, because so much of it for me is so automatic and probably trauma related underneath. You know, if I sit with it, it's and so the stuff that's still there, it's automatic. It's so fast. I don't really have a choice, and I think it's being able to make it amenable to choice. Can I choose to mask intentionally? Can I choose to adapt intentionally in a way that's sincere or can I show up as my full self? And those are that's the kind of range that we, you know, and I think it's moving from that, being able to, you know, being able to actually mask versus to be me in a way that's appropriate to the situation, is the difference. It's I think there's a, you know, there's a really difficult thing there around, like, well, what if I don't have the ability, or what if I don't have the, you know, and I think for me, part of that is actually about, part of being safe to unmask is that the environment supports us. It doesn't fail in ways that, you know, the kind of mistakes that we make, everyone makes mistakes. We tend to make different sets of mistakes if we're neurodivergent, not more, but different. The reason they show up more is because the world isn't designed to be safe for those kind of mistakes, whereas it is for neurotypicals. And I think so creating that space where it's okay to be us is a big part of that. The other side of this as well, being kind of supported by the people around us and the environment. So it isn't a problem to be us.
Yeah, tough to come across some of these spaces depending where you
have to
work,
make
where
them,
you
I think.
evolve and live, etc. I think yeah, it's an interesting one, because there's a lot of, you know, we're inclusive and this and that and the other, but when you do this, it's not quite what we expect, you know. I mean, we were just talking about, it sounds like a silly example, but earlier about being on time and the notion of time, which when you have ADHD is very different. It's different. You know, I'm always 5 minutes late. I don't mean to, it just happens. I can't be on time. And where do we create the space where that is totally, you know, fine and acceptable and accepted, because you're going to get the job done anyway. And even if you didn't actually, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. You see, this is what happens. This is what happens. I'm loving this conversation, by the way. I don't normally jump around like this so much. I wanted to take us to, because what I heard from these answers a lot is around bringing that awareness, that self-awareness, that consciousness to when am I masking, when am I not masking, and kind of recognizing that and unlearning some of these ingrained patterns, this automated neural pathways that just go straight to, okay, boop, mask on, yeah, happy, cheery me, you know, not not, you know, shifting around person. I personally remember very clearly, I was about 8-9 years old, and the bullying was really intense, and I decided at that moment, I can't be myself because it's not safe to be myself. And I started observing people around me, what I thought in my mind is normal people, which now that's why I'm putting inverted commas, because what does that even mean? But at the time, you know, for a child, I'm like, this is, you know, and then I tried to mirror and become, and eventually kind of happened that I became, but at what cost, right? And it came to a point in my life where I had masked so much for so long, we're talking like 20 plus years, that I completely broke down, because I realized I don't even know who I am. I have no idea. So Matthew, when you were talking about what does unmask me even look like, who is me was my question to myself. So I'm wondering, like, do you have any suggestions for anyone who finds themselves in this kind of situation where they've lost completely, they feel like they completely lost touch with themselves? So the real beginning of that unmasking journey, if that makes sense.
I think it's such a difficult thing to do, because, and I completely, you know, I was 39 when I was diagnosed with ADHD and 41 with autism. That's a long time of not even knowing how much I was masking. And for me, a lot of this is about connecting back with ourselves, finding, you know, finding comfort, finding what actually works for us and working outwards from that. Because so much of, I think, the masking is what's acceptable to the outside world, and whatever's left over is mine, versus instead being, actually, what works for me, and being like, well, if that doesn't work for someone else, That's okay. You know, but being clear on that, like getting comfortable. And I know it's a weird thing because people talk about, you know, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, and it drives me fucking mad.
There's a
Because
sled.
it's like, yeah, there you go. It really annoys me because it's like, I'm autistic, right? I wake up uncomfortable. It's like, seriously. But there's kind of a validity in it, in the sense of like all creatures, we're all living beings. What we are afraid of is not comfort or discomfort, it's familiar and unfamiliar. And the fact is, I'm familiar with being uncomfortable. And so what I have to do is engage with the scary unfamiliar that's being happy and comfortable and secure. And that is the work. And I think that for me is the thing, and understanding that difference, like learning to trust what I like, learning to, you know, and play, you know, I love the Krystle that you mentioned, play and playfulness. It's so important. Like, what do we actually enjoy? And being able to enjoy stuff and being with people who enjoy us being us and who we enjoy being them, being with people who we feel like we like ourselves when we're with them. That for me has been the way to explore this, though with the caveat that I don't think I'm ever going to find a fixed identity. Nothing in my world has never worked like that. I like the change, I like the dynamic stuff, but it's getting like, it's also partly just becoming comfortable with that.
I love that. I've also learned to let go of some of these things, like how it's meant to be or how I think I'm meant to be and act. And when people go, even today I got asked, oh, I looked at your CV and it didn't really make sense to me. Can you explain? And I just laughed and I was like, it doesn't make sense because it doesn't follow a rational pathway that people expect. It follows an emotional pathway of likes and dislikes, interests and disinterests, and boredom and moving on to something new. And I love what you said about the inside out work. I think we, a lot of the time, and I count myself in the we, definitely have a tendency of looking out for fixes. You know, can I buy something? Can I do a course? Can I pay someone to fix something for me? I think that perspective of shifting it and looking in, what moves me? What am I curious about? What works for me? What doesn't work for me? There's a lot to be said about that step. It's uncomfortable and I don't want to get comfortable with it, but it works. It helps massively. Krystle, what about for you? What would be your advice?
It's funny, Matthew, when you were talking and you spoke about familiar and unfamiliar, and the example you gave about being unfamiliar with the safety, I felt that, actually. I really did. And I'm going to go away and think about that after this session. And I think that really is massive, because linking back to what you just picked up on there, Selene, and I'm getting my words, taking time to learn what you truly want, like, feel comfortable, enjoy. If that's been so deeply packed away because you've been masking, you've possibly forgotten or lost what that even means for you. What is that? So there is definitely work there to sit and allow yourself to explore that. And I guess then it's, how do you explore that? What does that look like? Personally, I did that with a therapist. And I know obviously therapists are not available to everybody given the cost. You know, you can go through PGP. We're not going to talk about that stuff. That's another conversation. I think people are talking about it in the chat, getting assessed and stuff. But yeah, I think definitely self-exploration in a safe environment where you can get it, where, you know, if you discover something that is so odd, you know, not normal in your family or not normal in your friendship circle, it's having that safe space to allow yourself to explore that, whether it's just mentally through discussion or actually going out and exploring that thing. I think that's the route to take, to go on the journey of, you know, accepting those parts of you that are truly you at the core. But I also totally agree with you, Matthew, when you talk about, you know, the identity journey, or, you know, it not being fixed. I totally agree. I don't think identities are fixed. We've got too many variables that impact us: emotions, environment, you know, all that stuff. When something happens, you're then now a new person. It changes your physiology, and, you know, it's not a stagnant thing. But I think definitely it's about being able to explore those areas safely and not be judged and, you know, looked at negatively or harmed, or, which is the hard part, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, I can relate to so much of this, and I can see in the chat as well that a lot of people are relating to it. So we're gonna now conclude the portion that is recorded. For anyone watching this, I'm gonna do a little conclusion, and everyone else who is here live, do stay, because the best part is coming. This is when you get to ask all your questions and also share any stories that you want to share with us as well. Before I do the little conclusion, I actually found this quote, and I just wanted to share it as a bit of a wrap up. I don't know, it's staying with me, so so see what you think. It's by Shel Silverstein, and I do apologize if I mispronounce Shel's name. She had blue skin, and so did he. He kept it hid, and so did she. They searched for blue their whole life through, then passed right by and never knew. And I feel like today we've spoken a lot about our blue and some of these parts that we've hidden from each other. And I just feel so privileged to have been part of this conversation and to continue this conversation for those who are here live. For those who are watching the recording, this is the end of the recording part. So thank you for watching. You can find the next episode on Eventbrite, so you can actually be here live and ask all of your questions. You can follow us on Instagram at @BeyondBorders, and also check out the website. There are plenty of previous episodes to watch by now. This is episode 16, so we've covered a lot of topics related to diversity, inclusion, disability, and neurodiversity, and there's more to come. So hopefully see a lot of you for episode 17, which is going to be about borderline personality disorder, as May is Borderline Personality Disorder Awareness Month. So looking forward to it. And that's the end of the recording.